November the 2nd, 2024, and it is Labor Day. And so I know that some of you have a day off, have a long weekend, and maybe you've just celebrated like one last time before the fall and the busyness kicks in. But that's awesome. And so we're getting ready to get into Ecclesiastics today. And so as we get ready, I want you to think about this opportunity to get to study and read the thoughts of the wisest man ever on earth other than Jesus. Here's Solomon. And what did we learn about Solomon in the past? Let me get my other Bible out. I'm Bible stacked today. Solomon wrote this like 3,000 years ago. And it's like this human dilemma. And the insights and applications of this message is relevant in our time. As I read the chapter 1 through 3 today, for today, I just started thinking about all of the futility in my life as Solomon speaks about his. He had everything he ever wanted and needed and yearned for. Yet he hit that point in his life that he saw it was meaningless. So let's get going. But first, I'd like to invite you to put your prayer request and your praise reports in the chat box. Man, we like to join you in that each and every day. And there's miracles to be praised, and there's prayer requests to be just, oh man, you just want to um, keep everybody lifted up in times like this, because there's just so many crazy things that happens, and we need a lot of Jesus. We need prayers. We need to have somebody joining us and lifting us up in that today. So uh, let me move on now. So he says in Ecclesiastes 1:1, these are the words of the teacher. And so some says, would say, well, who is this talking about? Well, we know it's Solomon, but he identifies himself on down in here. Here he says the words of the teacher, King David's son. He had several sons, but it was who ruled in Jerusalem. When we drop down to verse 12, it says, I, the teacher, was king of Israel, and I lived in Israel. So he's definitely identified himself. And so no question about that. As he continues on talking about the words, let's see, the words of the teacher. So here's the words. Here's his thoughts as he gets started. Verse 2. Everything is meaningless. Now, other versions, if you're looking at King James Version or something else, it's probably saying vanity. It's the vanity of vanities. And that's mentioned like 22 times in 16 verses as you're reading certain versions of the Bible. And so what is that? That's like self-conceit, narcissism, futility, and uselessness. Do we go back and reevaluate our day and think about, were we productive in the kingdom of God? Were we using this time we have to share the gospel? Did we encourage somebody? Did we do what God put us on this earth to do? This it says completely meaningless in the New Living Translation. Verse 3. What do people get for all of their hard work under the sun? Now that he's going to repeat this over and over and over again. It makes you think of Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh. And just, oh, here we go again. It's hopeless. It's despair. And King Solomon writes this in the later part of his life, not in the beginning. In the beginning, he knew that and yearned for wisdom. Now I'm going to read you another little tidbit here because this certainly applies to us as we're getting ready to read all of this. But wisdom is only effective when it's put into action. So early in Solomon's life, he had the sense to recognize his need for wisdom. But by the time he asked for wisdom to rule his kingdom, he had already started a habit of things in his life that would make it ineffective. Look what he did. He paired himself up with women to gain power in the kingdoms, and so he had more wives, more concubines, more interaction with the wrong people than he was supposed to have had. So that tells us that God's gift of wisdom for Solomon did not mean he would not make mistakes. He had been given possibilities, great possibilities, as the king of God's chosen people. But with great possibilities came great responsibilities too. So he did not do well in the beginning of his uh, rule. So he says then in verse 4, generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. Um, so I'm looking at my notes here. I had there so generations come and generations go. For me, I was thinking about, I wonder if any of my kids or grandkids will ever wonder about their ancestors and all of that. I mean, I can't even, if I don't go, but I can only tell you a probably a great great grandma's name. I can't even go back any farther than that. So whatever they did, whatever their life was like, I don't know. That, I mean, generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. I don't know what those people did, but you know what? The land still looks the same. The stars still are in the sky. The sun still comes up. The days end and then it rotates and it begins again. Everything is the same. Everything is the same. He shows the futility and foolishness of a life without an eternal perspective. And so one of the titles I had on this particular verses 4 through 7 was the coffins and cradles, because everybody is born and everybody will die. That's never changed. Sin has entered the world through Adam and Eve in the garden, and life began decaying at that point. He says the sun rises, the sun sets, and then hurries to rise again. The wind blows south, then it turns north. Around it goes, blowing in circles. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. For us today, it's like mowing your lawn. You've done it. Well, you know that you're going to do it again. It's a growing plant. It grows, and if you're not tending to it, you'll have weeds. It will be overgrown. But it is something that you have to continually do. It's like one application of weed killer doesn't take care of it forever. We have to keep doing things over and over and over, and then we step back and look, and it's like it can become mindless. You don't even have to think about it. It's the same thing over and over and over. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. See, he keeps talking about the cycles of creation. We get down to verse 8. Everything is wearisome, beyond description. No matter how much we see, we're never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we're not content. History repeats itself. It has all been done before. There's nothing new under the sun. This says there's nothing truly new under the sun. So, new under the sun, when Solomon looks at all things, he doesn't see anything that comforts him at all. The more he knows, the more he realizes he's lacking. Just like for anybody, the more man thinks he knows, he still doesn't know it all. He can think that he is just fully in knowledge of something. But we will never know everything on this side of eternity. The new thing changes this from the worldly sense to like spiritual. Solomon is kind of talking about into the kingdom. Nothing new under the sun, but thankfully for us, for the followers of Christ, we are born again by the Spirit, by God's Spirit. And not living under the sun in that sense. There is life filled with new things when we enter into the kingdom. He gives us a new name. And you can read about that in Isaiah 62:2. He gives us a new community. Ephesians 2:14. He gives us help from angels. Psalms 91:11. He gives us a new commandment, John 13:34. He gives us a new covenant, Jeremiah 31:33. He gives us a new and living way to heaven, Hebrews 10:30. He gives us purity, 1 Corinthians 5:7. New nature, Ephesians 4:24. A new creation in Jesus, 2 Corinthians 5:17. All things become new, 2 Corinthians 5:17 and Revelation 21:15. So what's the meaning of life? We will be digging into all of this throughout the next 16 chapters. When you start feeling burned out, unfulfilled, tired, that's when our thoughts can go the complete wrong direction. That's why we stay into the Word. What's important? What is important today in the kingdom? We don't know everything about the world, how it's made. Only God knows that. But we can just stand amazed, just like the sea's never full. I can fill a bathtub and it will run over because it's only so much it will hold, but it's just like the boundaries that God put on the waters is just amazes me. How it always it flows in, it flows back out, it recedes. Psalms 104:5 says, "You who laid the foundations of the earth so that it should not be moved forever." We're not going to change anything here. God's the only one that's going to do that. So, verse 9, history merely repeats itself. It's all been done before. And someone might say, well, that's not true. They didn't have cell phones or internet. They didn't communicate like we can today in an instant. But the thing is, we're talking about communication. People communicated. And we'll all communicate in different ways, shapes or forms, but it's still communication. It's still living life and breathing every day. It's still the basic things that never change. As it says in verse 10, sometimes people say, here's something new, but actually it's not. Nothing is ever truly new on this side of heaven. So many good things in this. Talking about chasing the wind in verse 14, I observed going on under the sun, and really, it's all meaningless, like chasing the wind. What's wrong cannot be made right. What's missing cannot be removed or recovered. You break something, there's always evidence of it being broke. At least there is in my house. I'm generally the one that breaks it, but that's another story. So Solomon said in verse 17, so I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly, but I learned firsthand that pursuing all of this is like chasing the wind. I challenge you to study this and just soak up what Solomon says. Wisdom, as he's seeing it, I'm sure that like us and Solomon, we always wished that we could go back and redo some things because I wasn't wise. Well, you know what? I won't say at one point in time I wasn't wise, because I still have wisdom-less days. But I can pray for wisdom. It's just like in James, he says, pray for wisdom. And that's what we need to do every day, because if I step back and look about how futile life has been in my home, I've bought things that I've thrown away. Well, I spent a lot of money on that. If I would have just stepped back and thought, will this help the kingdom? Probably not. What will help the kingdom is spreading the gospel. Put all my time and energy into that, because as we get on over here into, I'm going to jump completely over from chapter 2 is talking about the vanity of doing. And this is still chasing the wind, because you can't catch the wind. You can't chase it. You feel it, but you can't chase it. Everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind. And this is all in the doing part. Now, if we get over into chapter 3, here it's talking about the seasons. We like to want to know when, what if, just lots of questions. But as we look at this in verses 1 through 8, if you're in my era, you heard the song, for everything there is a season. I want to sing it, but I won't do that because my kids might be watching today. But time is important. Now, we know that in a 24-hour period, there's 86,400 seconds in a day, in a 24-hour period. And so what will you do with any of those seconds? They beat fast, they tick off, and before you know it, that day is gone and another one begins. Again, it's just like nothing new. But for everything, there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. God has built certain rhythms into his world. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest. Time can't be stored, folks. It can't be stopped or slowed. Every minute wasted is a minute lost, a lost gift, a lost opportunity. When I think about the past, the opportunities that I had that I thought, I'll get it tomorrow, and those opportunities were gone. It's like that window opens just for a little bit, and when it's closed, that's it. Somebody else stepped into that opportunity that you failed to step into. The time that we have right now is a gift from God. I'm celebrating my birthday weekend with the kids here, but actually tomorrow is my birthday. And time flies when you're having a good time, as my mom used to say. But you know what? It does fly if we think about what opportunities we're missing, how things are falling out. What should I do today that would be honoring? Let's manage this time wisely. Let's don't just spend it. Just like I just spent my money on things that was silly. There's another knickknack on the shelf. Oh, it might be valuable someday. Well, what if you knock it off the shelf? That ended that opportunity for that to become valuable, or a great antique to pass on to the grandkids. It's broke. Doesn't matter. We must remember that whatever this moment holds, it too shall pass. It can be a good day, it can be a bad day. But you know what? The sun's going to go down, you're going to go to bed, you're going to get up tomorrow. I spoke with a person yesterday and having a really, really rough time in life. And I compare that to like climbing a mountain. We can't climb a mountain that's got a smooth, shiny road because you'd slip off. You can climb a mountain one step at a time whenever it's rough because you can get a hold of those edges and you can pull yourself up. And if you will be consistent and persevere in your climb, you will reach the top. Every season of our life is determined and purposed by God. It says there's a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to cry, a time to laugh, a time to grieve, and a time to dance. There's a time frame for all of it. We don't want to just stretch out and everything always fall into the grief time, or our whole life is nothing but laughter. I mean, that would be great. But we don't learn anything from this if we only spend our time in one particular season. God is involved in everything. He's given you a time to tear and a time to mend. That time to tear has to do with them ripping their garments in mourning. But then there's a time to mend it back. And then a great one. A time to be quiet and a time to speak. This is the seasons of the tongue. The seasons of the tongue. Do you know when you should speak and when you should just be silent? We just read about Job and his friends. That gave us a great example of silence is golden. That you open your mouth whenever you're ready to encourage somebody, not to point fingers and condemn. That doesn't get us anywhere. And then finally in that, verse 8, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. God says there's a time to hate. I thought we weren't supposed to hate as Christians. But you know what? We do love people because God loves people. But we do hate their actions whenever it goes against what the word says. So we can love people, we can hate their actions. We can hate the evil in the world because evil is there. We hate everything about evil. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to jump into 2 Corinthians real quick. And let's study about Solomon's wisdom in Ecclesiastics and just keep digging in and digging into it because I am really excited about learning from the wisest man on earth besides Jesus. When we get into 2 Corinthians 6, 1 through 13, then here's Paul. And like he's the bold guy, the guy that did everything as God's partners. That's Paul and his workers, beg you, the Corinthians, not to accept this marvelous gift of God's kindness and then ignore it. So they're God's workers. That's important. God wants us all to work together. It doesn't matter what denomination, what church, or where you go. Let's work together and let's spread the gospel because let me tell you, all of the demons are working and however demons work together to take you away and ruin that. God says at just the right time I heard you. On the day of salvation, I helped you. Time is very important, just like we just read in Ecclesiastes 3. Timing is important. It says, indeed, the right time is now. Today is the day of salvation. Acts 2:21 says, and everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Paul's telling us today is the day of salvation. Today is the day that you can mark this down on your calendar, that you called on the name of the Lord. to be saved today. Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and I'll tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." Indeed, the right time is now, today, the day of salvation. If you write this down, Romans 10:8 through 11, read this today, because this is talking about God's living message is close to you, as close as your own heart beating in your chest, and as near to your tongue as in your mouth. And what is his living message? It's the revelation of faith for salvation. And this is what we preach. Paul goes on to talk about what happened. His credentials as a blameless minister. And so the hardships, he says, we patiently endure trouble and hardships. I don't do that very well, y'all. If the air conditioner goes out at church, I've got my little fan out, and I'm trying to keep myself from perspiring because I'm uncomfortable. Do you think that would have affected Paul? No. He said, we have been beaten, put in prison, faced angry mobs, worked to exhaustion, endured sleepless nights, and gone without food. Oh, heaven forbid I miss a meal. We prove ourselves by our purity, our understanding, our patience, our kindness. Does that sound like the fruit of the Spirit? By the Holy Spirit within us, our sincere love. Let me ask you a question today. Is there enough evidence for you to be taken to prison for your Christian life and your walk? How long would they have to watch you to say, grab him, grab her? They're spreading the gospel too much. They're just spreading the gospel. Grab them. I'm afraid they're getting wound up. Grab them. Or do they pass by you, say, no, they're going to get tired in a minute. They're going to start sweating and they're going to go home. They're hungry. They're not going to stay here. They might miss a meal. They've never had a hunger pain. They could die, so they're gonna go. We're gonna remind them how hungry they are. God is using you. There's going to be opposition. Anytime that you're spreading the gospel, there is opposition. So remind those powers of darkness today that they've already been defeated by Jesus. At the end of verse 7, it says, we use the weapons of righteousness in the right hand for attack and the left hand for defense. The right hand and the left hand. Weapons for the right hand are offensive weapons. Those on the left hand are defensive weapons. So no soldier is fully prepared for a battle without both, the shield and the sword. So look at Ephesians 6. You'll find the armor of God. You need to put in fact, you should never take off the armor. You should be ready to march out there and stand up and face that opposition and have yourself ready, be equipped. God's equipping you every day. But see, we're going to be slandered whenever we step out of that comfort zone that we like to stay in. Verse 11, oh dear Corinthian friends, we have spoken honestly with you and our hearts are open to you. There's no lack of love on our part, but you have withheld your love from us. Open your hearts to us. We serve a God. Paul was faithful to God, whether people praised him or not. So don't let circumstances or expectations control you. These Corinthians loved themselves too much. and refuse to really deal with their selfish and worldly attitudes towards Paul. That can take us back to Ecclesiastes where Solomon is talking about everything is meaningless. All of these worldly things that we've seen, if it's pretty shiny, if it's the new and improved, it's not new, possibly improved. Do you need it? Will it be anything different than what you're doing right now? Probably not. Do something that matters into the kingdom today. It's so worth it. You'll be glad you did, and they will be glad that you stepped out of your comfort zone to come share the gospel with them. So thank you so much for joining me this morning on this wonderful Monday, this Labor Day, that we can just, let's labor for the Lord today. I'll be back at noon to see you with my noon nuggets, and I'll be on tomorrow. So join me again. I love y'all. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.